Ms. Zhang Lihui, President, Caixin Media, Ms. Wushu Li and Professor John Thornton, co-chairs of the Caixin Asia New Vision Forum, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning, and to all our overseas guests, a warm welcome to Singapore. Let me first congratulate Shu Li and her team at Caixin Global for launching this inaugural Asia New Vision Forum and bringing together an excellent list of speakers from Asia and beyond to meet in person and engage in deep dialogues on the future of Asia. Now, Singapore is really just a little red dot on the map, but we place great value on building understanding and connections. So we are always happy to serve as a platform to bring people, businesses, and cultures together. So you see, I'm speaking on the left side of the stage, and earlier speakers were all speaking on the right. So we hope to be a good, trusted, neutral location for everyone to talk. Now, this inaugural forum covers many important issues, from financial stability, global trade and mobilizing capital, to harnessing new opportunities in technology and promoting sustainable development. Underlying these topics is a critical question of what Asian countries need to do, individually and in partnership with the global community, to achieve inclusive, sustainable development. I hope this new forum will catalyze dialogues and fresh thinking on these critical issues. We are gathering at a time of great global uncertainty. The global economy is facing high inflation resulting from supply chain disruptions, the Ukraine war, high energy prices, and geopolitical tensions. This has dampened the post-COVID recovery. International financial institutions remain intact for now, but the collapse of some banks, and some major ones too, has reminded us of the importance of financial stability. The tone of global cooperation has shifted. The past decades of globalization is slowing and even reversing. We are hearing more talk of decoupling. Supply chains are fragmenting as countries and companies prioritize resilience to manage geopolitical and pandemic risks. Finally, there are concerns that we may miss the window to tackle climate change, which is a global existential issue. At the same time, there are bright spots. The pace of science and technological innovation has accelerated. This holds hope for building better lives and a better world, be it through biotechnology, green technology, digitalization, or AI. There are also strong fundamentals in Asia's growth story. South Asia and Southeast Asia have youthful populations and a growing middle class. In the coming years, Asia can reap population and consumption dividends and offer strong growth and investment prospects. With this mixture of hopefulness and uncertainty, your deliberations over the next 2 days will be valuable, and as both John and Shu Li mentioned earlier, we hope that you'll be action-oriented. So let me start by outlining a few key issues. The most critical precondition for Asia and the world to continue growing and making progress is peace and stability. In this regard, the US-China bilateral relationship is the most important relationship in the world. In 2000, the US supported China's entry into the WTO. I think John was still at Goldman Sachs. In fact, I was at Doha witnessing this. That cooperation has since morphed into a trade war, a tech war, and a broader strategic competition. Sharp words have been traded and tensions have risen. What does this portend? Let me draw on the wisdom of two men who are widely respected for their understanding of the US and China, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew and Dr. Henry Kissinger. In a recent interview, Dr. Kissinger said, and I quote, "We are on the path to great power confrontation because both sides have convinced themselves that the other represents a strategic danger," unquote. The most dangerous flashpoint in the region is the Taiwan Strait, where there's a risk of accident or miscalculation. When Mr. Lee was asked a question about the US and China in 2011, his observation was that China's growth could challenge America's preeminence. So competition will be inevitable, but, I quote, "it need not lead to conflict." But Mr. Lee also warned that once you start at whatever level, conflicts will likely escalate and the losing side will eventually have to use nuclear weapons in a bid to limit the damage. That will be the beginning of the end, unquote. That is why Mr. Lee said, both sides must do everything they can to avoid even minor conflicts. We are now at an uncomfortable and indeed dangerous point. But all of this is not an inevitability. It is still possible to step away from confrontation and conflict, and both sides must do so and build strategic trust. Today's world is highly connected and interdependent. China is the largest trading partner for over 120 countries, while the US has significant investments in Singapore, Asia, and around the world. Unbridled and unchecked competition with no guardrails will generate great cost and hardship across the world. It will be a big step backwards for all countries. So we should all welcome recent positive signs that China and the US are serious about improving ties. Communications between officials on both sides have grown over the past few months, and Secretary Blinken is expected to visit Beijing this week. So we look forward to a good outcome. Many countries, Singapore included, welcome this because a fragmented and unstable world leaves all of us worse off. Countries in ASEAN and around the world do not wish to choose sides, as most have deep linkages with both major powers. I've touched on the most critical precondition for having peace and stability in Asia and the importance of the US and China resetting their relations. But Asia and the rest of the world must also take active steps to bring about greater collaboration. Let me suggest 3 areas to pursue. First, we must continue to uphold an open, inclusive, and rules-based framework to drive greater trade and investment. Notwithstanding the pushback against globalization in some parts of the world, the desire to pursue greater economic integration remains strong within Asia and many countries outside Asia. This is anchored in the belief that free trade and greater economic integration will continue to uplift economies and populations. Within ASEAN, for instance, we've been working hard to build the ASEAN Economic Community and pursue a common market of over 650 million people. Individually and as a group, ASEAN countries have negotiated trade agreements with partners in Asia and around the world. ASEAN's free trade agreements with China, India, Japan, Korea, and Australia and New Zealand have brought mutual benefits and deepened ties. And as John mentioned earlier, ASEAN and China are each other's biggest trading partners, even more than between US and the EU. In recent years, many ASEAN countries are taking part in new regional trade agreements like RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. The modalities may look different from the previous iterations, but if these new arrangements could serve as pathfinders and help build confidence for broader global involvement eventually, then we must continue to pursue them. Second, beyond trade, we must promote greater flows of financial resources across the world to catalyze economic development and innovation. This must be underpinned by strong international financial institutions and cooperation. It is important that there are several sessions addressing financial stability and development in this forum. In the last 25 years, the region has gone through the Asian financial crisis, the global financial crisis, and the latest COVID-19 crisis. I was happy to meet Andrew Zhang earlier because we were at the central banks and regulators at that time. I was running the Monetary Authority of Singapore when the global financial crisis erupted. And remember how governments around the world had to take extraordinary actions to avoid a financial and economic meltdown. Since then, we have strengthened macro and microprudential measures and improved risk management, but more needs to be done. The recent bank failures show that crisis remains a recurring feature of financial flows. Sentiments can change quickly, fueled by the speed of today's communications and the risk of fake news. Fear and financial contagion can spread even more swiftly. This is why all players must continue to upgrade risk management measures and remain vigilant. But on the other hand, the efficient intermediation of capital to productive users can catalyze growth and address global challenges. Within Asia, countries like Japan and China have significant pools of savings. If this can be mobilized to productive users and to support the real economy, it can bring benefits across the region and the world. Multilateral and regional institutions like the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank will play important roles in partnering governments and the private sector to mobilize capital and allocate risks efficiently and appropriately. Another financial flow we should promote is venture capital and private equity funding to support startups that are riding the waves of scientific and technological innovation. For example, in 2021, the value of venture capital market deals across ASEAN was a record US $20 billion. As the pace of innovation accelerates, venture capital and private equity funding will be key to catalyzing this engine of growth. The third area that all countries can and must work on together is in addressing common challenges that all countries face around the world. We may have overcome COVID-19, but the next pandemic is not an if, but an when. We must build on the linkages and practices that were established during this pandemic to better prepare for the next one. The responsibility for keeping our populations safe and healthy is a universal one. In a highly interconnected world, this is best achieved through collaboration across borders, sectors, and organizations. Going beyond pandemics, another global health issue that could benefit from collaborative action is aging and the growing burden of chronic diseases. While respective countries tackle the different dimensions of aging, from research to drug development and community interventions, we could do faster and do better by exchanging ideas, sharing expertise, and co-developing solutions. We must also confront climate change with renewed efforts and collaboration. The impetus for collective action has grown more urgent. Across the world, the impact of climate change and extreme weather patterns is tangible, affecting lives and livelihoods. To catalyze the global energy transition and have a shot at the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, the world needs technological innovations and significant investments to be mobilized across borders. Like pandemics, climate change does not discriminate. It will affect us all. The faster we can mobilize collective action, the better. Pulling the three threads together, what we must do and what we must work towards is a new global architecture that promotes inclusive and sustainable development. We are not starting from zero base. The 2015 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals provides a framework of 17 goals covering the economic, social, and environmental domains. We are now midway to the SDGs 2030 timeline, but the progress is far from ideal. We must do better. Apart from valuing our common humanity, there is a structural and strategic argument for inclusive development which is demographic driven. So let me repeat the points that John just made. The current strategic competition is dominated by the two largest economies, the US and China. They hold around 40% of global GDP today. But existing cleavages, such as those between developed and developing countries, remain. Over time, this could deepen. By 2050, we expect the world population to grow by another 2 billion. More than half of this increase is expected to come from countries in Asia and Africa. In other words, the demographic boom from the global south will surely affect global power dynamics. If we predict that come 2050, the US and China will hold 50 to 60% of global GDP, how might this concentration of wealth sit with the demographic trajectory. There are already rumblings, such as calls to reform the UN Security Council and revamp the Bretton Woods institutions. It is driven by the argument that current global institutions and architecture do not equitably reflect the realities of today's world. These are difficult issues, and much can be said about it. The point is that we must not only fixate on the short-term view of strategic competition. The rapid pace of technological innovation could accelerate and exacerbate inequalities, since technology tends to reward the able far more sharply. If we do not address underlying structural impulses, this will add new dimensions to the strategic competition and in turn grow the risk of instability and conflict. The pursuit of an inclusive and sustainable global development agenda must continue in earnest. It is in every country's interest, especially the US and China, to help develop a new architecture that enables inclusive and sustainable development. Globalization, underpinned by free trade and an open multilateral system, has uplifted economies and populations across the world. Looking ahead, even as the complexion and modality of global cooperation evolve, the fundamental imperatives remain unchanged. Just as trade had and continue to uplift millions, science and technology will be the next key to building better lives and livelihoods for our respective populations and across the world. We are better off unlocking these possibilities together, not just the US and China, but across ASEAN, Asia, Europe, and the rest of the world. So let me conclude. I started out by highlighting the importance of peace and stability for regional and global growth, and the dangers posed by strategic competition slipping into confrontations and conflict. I highlighted 3 areas where we could collaborate to increase trust, facilitate growth, and pursue inclusive and sustainable development. Countries across the world must do our part to enable this by working on a forward-looking agenda to tackle shared challenges. But key to this is leadership from the US and China. With the 2 biggest economies in the world involved, we can make meaningful progress and break new ground together. Competition is understandable, but it does not have to be zero-summed, nor is it the opposite of collaboration. Competition and collaboration can coexist. I'm hopeful that over time, we'll ease into a new pattern of engagement and collaboration that will continue to facilitate growth and prosperity across the world. In the meantime, let's do all our part as individual countries forging cooperation, as regional partners pursuing mutually beneficial opportunities, as colleagues and counterparts meetings at forums such as this to deepen understanding, build trust, and find practical ways forward. This way, we can collectively work towards a new vision of a peaceful, stable, and prosperous world for which Asia will then thrive. Thank you very much.